course, definitely. And so to cap it off here with these sort of explicit questions we have before we run into the Q&A, technology careers, specifically obviously in data science and AI and machine learning, are just becoming more and more popular. And so, as someone who is a professional in those industries and still is, what would you recommend for students who want to get involved in these industries and help them stand out?
So, I mean, clearly there's an educational path if you're interested in those, if you're interested in those fields. I'm going to say that there's two aspects of it. And I lead a club with my daughter at her high school that's called Girls Who Solve. And the reason why we founded Girls Who Solve is because there are resources for coding, but not all data science and machine learning is actually about the coding itself. Some of it is actually about problem solving. So there are really two ways that you can really venture into data science and machine learning. One way is to focus on actually being the practitioner, to do the coding, to work with the data, to have the scientific acumen to be able to work through a project to answer questions and conduct experiments and find insights. But there's another side of that coin that I don't think is discussed as freely, and that is really looking at these problems from a business perspective and understanding data science and machine learning enough to understand the applications and what you should be doing in that strategic direction for those types of projects. Now, so that's what we founded Girls Who Solve at my daughter's high school, to very specifically focus on the problem solving, because we just found that there weren't any STEM resources for girls that didn't want to code, that just identified that coding was just, voluntary math homework and they didn't want to be doing it. There's so much about understanding the application of how companies are using AI to solve problems. And I'll give you one of my favorite examples. We did a session with Guiding Eyes for the Blind, which is a great problem. They raise puppies that become guide dogs, and each puppy that they raise costs about $50,000, and they rely on their donations to fund that. Well, the graduation rate of a puppy is only about 30%. And you don't know if the guide dog is going to be successful until you're about 2 years into the process. And so they had a problem. How can we predict which dogs will be successful? That's a great problem. That's a great problem for machine learning. So they worked together with IBM to develop a specific biometric IoT device that the dogs wore to look for patterns, so they can figure out what are the leading indicators that would indicate if a dog would be successful. And sure enough, it turned out that they found that when a stressor was introduced into the animal's environment, whether it was a loud noise or something sudden, the animal's heart rate would immediately speed up, right? That's a natural reaction. You get startled, your heart rate increases. Same thing for the dogs. But what they found was some dogs, their heart rate returned to normal more quickly than other dogs that took longer to return to their baseline. And it turned out that that was an incredible predictor of success, that if the heart rate returned to normal more fast, I don't think that's proper English, but if it returned quickly, then that was a good indicator that they would actually successfully graduate. And that allowed them to monitor the puppies when they were younger, so that they could, in fact, redirect dollars away from young puppies that didn't look like they would graduate, and shift it over into more puppies so that they can increase their graduation rates. I mean, I love this project because it does so much good in the world, but being able to think through how can we use technology, coming up with ideas. You don't have to be a coder to think about applications of technology. You have to have a really solid understanding of technology, which I guess is what served me so well. But that problem solving, that critical thinking is really what's so valuable in the marketplace. So things that fascinate you, I would say find the things that light you up. Find the things that you think are, do you want to say hi? My co-founder, my 16-year-old is here. She's peeking her head here. You want to say hi? Okay. So I want you to think about that data science and machine learning doesn't necessarily mean the practitioner end, and whatever draws you in, just keep reading and keep developing that in yourself. Now, if you are a practitioner, I want to speak to you very, very directly right now. If you are a practitioner and you love coding and this is what you want to do, I want to give you very special advice. And that is, make sure you understand very clearly what the end goal of any project is so that you can tell a compelling story around what your project was and what action someone needs to take. Because so many projects right now, and so much of the source of frustration that the executives expressed is, we can find the insights, we just can't act as an organization. And data science is very scary to a lot of people. There are people that are in job roles that rely on experience and expertise that they have honed over a decade or more. And in walks your model that's going to tell them something that's counterintuitive to them. And they will immediately discount that, to them, black box, that they don't know what's happening there, but I know better. And they ignore the science. And so as a practitioner, it's very important that you understand what action should somebody take based on the science. Make sure that people are involved in the project, at least touch bases, that you're getting their advice and their opinion and they're involved, and that you can tell a compelling story that someone wants to act when they get to the end of it.
I know I've talked a lot about what we've done and, how well we've done it and such, but the truth is we've made so many mistakes, like hundreds. And I generally make about 2 to 3 mistakes every day. I know I had a presentation with Zain, I believe on Friday, and literally I had to close my laptop and join from a different laptop because of a Zoom issue. So like, small issues like that. There's mistakes that we make, hundreds of mistakes, and it spans across everything, right? Product design, product, development. But I think I I could cover mistakes, for ages, but I think there's a couple mistakes that I'd like to focus on that I think are applicable to not only our company, but a lot of other companies. And if you guys, hopefully start your own companies, these are some of the biggest mistakes that you'll probably make, even though I'm going over them right now, but hopefully can avoid at least some of them. So one of them is launching things before they're ready. So you'll hear, like, it's a very typical advice. Oh, launch fast, fail fast. That is not bad advice. That is definitely good advice. I'm not saying you shouldn't launch fast, but what I'm saying is one thing we've learned is that launching before things are ready never works out well. So the one thing that we've seen is that even if we launch a product early because we think that we're on a time crunch where we have to launch a product early, there's so many things you have to do after the product launch that basically slow you down even more, right? So if we launch a product early, so let me give you an example. We launched one of our early platforms, and at that time we only had like 2,000 students using it. We had a lot of bugs. For the next 2-3 weeks, we were answering emails almost every day, every few hours, just to figure out what's wrong. And then we were fixing those bugs, late into the night, and then trying to launch, again. So there's definitely a clear point where you should kind of have like a line drawn, right? Like, I don't want to launch before this, right? And that's something that we've done and we've improved on over time. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, we aim to launch fast all the time, but the only thing we've changed is getting ready faster, right? So the goal isn't to keep delaying your launch. The goal is to get your launch ready faster, right? So that's what we've done, and that's what we've spent our time improving. Now, I would recommend that if you're not ready to launch, you don't launch, just because there's a lot more you have to do afterwards. Unless you're obviously testing something and you need to figure out, like, it's just a very bare bones prototype. You're not launching to like a mass audience, then it's a different story, right? If you're launching to people that have already started using your app, you don't want to piss them off. You don't want them to leave, right? If you're starting fresh, yes, launch faster and get a product out. That's the only way to kind of iterate and improve. So the second one, and this is a big one. I think this is, and I mentioned this on Friday too. This is probably the number one reason why companies fail. And it's not just arguing over profit sharing. It's just, the team collapses basically. And it just so happens that the number one reason the team collapses is probably profit sharing, because you just kind of assume that, everything will either be equal or it'll just be, according to your perspective, right? And I would say that's one of the traps that we fell into when we started. And that's a big thing that I've learned, right? So when we first started, we were pretty naive, right? So in high school, we thought we've come across the next, $1 billion idea. This is going to be the next big thing. In 2 or 3 years, we're going to be sitting on an island drinking Mai Tais, right? And that's not how life works. That's not. Don't ever make a company just assuming that, because quite the opposite happens. And so at that time, profits just seemed like the immediate thing, right? We're like, oh, the company is going to be big in like 2-3 years, so we should figure out, how much of the profit you're getting, how much of the company you're getting, and let's figure that out right now. Now it's not a bad thing to have those things drawn up clear from the start, but now what I've learned is that you should always go in with the assumption that you're going to fail, right? The fact of the matter is 90% of companies in startup stage fail, right? 10% make it out, one of 10. So if you go in with the assumption that you're going to fail, profit sharing becomes a very small problem. Now, it's not to say that things shouldn't be clear between you and whoever you're starting the company with, but don't ever stop building a product because you can't figure out a profit sharing. I'd say do everything possible to figure out a good agreement between you and another person, and put that aside and focus on the product. I think that's one of the biggest reasons we had a lot of trouble in the beginning, but over time we've learned, and now we make great products because we focus more on the product rather than how are we going to personally benefit from this. And I mentioned this a lot of times, but when you do that, you put aside what's good for you, and you more so focus on what's good for the company. And when you do that, you make better decisions, you make a better product, and you end up getting much better personal recognition or return in the end, right? So definitely things that I would recommend you not focus on in the beginning. Make sure it's clear between you and your founders, but don't argue over how much of the company you get over versus the other. Not at the expense of the company, right? I mean, you can argue, but just not at the expense. So the last one is developing things no one wants, because that's what you think they want, right? Now, the funny thing is, this is probably a more common problem for bigger companies that have kind of lost touch with their customers. But it's also a problem when you think that you are your customer, and you yourself are the customer. So that's a trap we fell into, because as students, we were building an app for students. So we just said, well, we're students and we want this and we study this way, so this must be the right thing to do. But really, every student studies differently. I mean, we could do a poll right now, and I bet you like 50% of you guys like study in a different way from me. For sure, right? So everybody studies in a different way. Everybody does things in a different way. So definitely you want to kind of research and before you build. There are some things that are pretty obvious that you need to add, and you can learn that from the past companies that the products that they've made. But that's something that you really want to focus on. And I would definitely stress that you should always ask your friends whenever you're building a product. But it's a good sign if you want it, but don't ever just rely on you wanting it sometimes. I mean, it's a good sign, but I would say ask your friends. So that's basically, I mean, most of my advice too. I know it was more so focused on our mistakes, but just to kind of sum up what I've learned from the company is that one, companies take a lot of time to build. So it's not a 2 or 3 year process. Many times it's a 5, 8 year, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and then however long you want to continue doing it process. So don't go in with the expectation that it's going to work out in 1 or 2 years. Sometimes it does. It does. It does work out sometimes in 1 or 2 years. Not many of the times, right? So if 10% of companies succeed, 1% of the 10% are succeeding in 1 or 2 years, right? And those are like your Facebooks or your Googles. Like there's some of those, but that's, don't go in with that expectation. Also, it's not to say don't dream big, but if you go in with the assumption that you're going to fail, you're going to try as hard as possible not to fail, but you won't be disappointed when you encounter obstacles, right? And so I think that's a big factor, because that's another companies fail, right? People get demoralized. They realize that some things aren't working out, and they basically quit, right? And the way I like to kind of understand it is like, if you buy tickets for the lottery, you wouldn't be disappointed, or you wouldn't quit buying the tickets for the lottery if you lost, the one time. The odds are not stacked in your favor. The odds are stacked against you, in fact. It's the same thing when starting a company, right? The odds are stacked against you. You're basically buying a lottery ticket. Now, of course, that lottery ticket, it's not the exact same comparison, because it really does depend on how hard you work and how lucky you get sometimes. But don't be disappointed when things don't work out. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. If we gave up at every point that we had trouble, we wouldn't be here, even at this point, right? Which is extremely early in our company stage. We wouldn't even be here. So it's definitely something that I would very, very highly recommend. And then for the sake of time for questions, I'll just kind of move on.
We're closing in on time. It's about 12:55. So thank you for sticking around for almost 3 hours now, or for some of you, the full 3 hours. So yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. But for all our members, more information about our next events will be provided soon via Slack. I believe you guys all do have access to the global members chat. If you guys do not, though, please email the international@internatus.org email. Yeah, so for many of you tuning in online who may be interested in becoming a member of IBC who aren't already, please check out any of our national chapters at internatus.org. You'll be able to find a bunch of information there, and go to the application tab specifically. So I want to take a moment to thank all of you guys for coming, and all of our speakers who made this happen by taking their time out of their day to share their insights with us. So yeah, this is very invaluable, not just for me, but I hope for all of you guys as well. And yeah, you guys will hear more from us. This was our first kind of global joint event that we kicked off together. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your long weekend. Yeah.